Well, we continue our Cuse Connection series. Brian Higgins here in Syracuse, and somewhere not too far away is former Syracuse lacrosse All-American Jovan Miller back in town. And Jovan, so great to see you with so much going on in the world right now.
It's hectic, but yes, it's great to see you too, man.
And, we've been saying these same things. We kind of started this series when COVID began and the world changed for the first time. And the world keeps on changing here. And that's the main reason we wanted to talk to you specifically, Jovan, because we've been having so many great conversations with people about Black Lives Matter and really just everything that's gone on around it. So I'll kind of give you the floor here. What has struck you the most, I guess, in now the last month, be it the protests, be it what you're seeing from athletes, being the George Floyd situation that kind of kickstarted this whole thing? What stands out most to you, or what has touched you most in a personal way?
I would have to say the level of camaraderie, the level of effort that I think people are putting in now. Now it's unfortunate that we are in this space, but it took the world to literally take a pause, to witness the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of the passing of George Floyd. But my thing is, I think, like I said, I've seen it's just the camaraderie. It seems like there's a conscious effort this time from all of America, black, white, whether you be, atheist or, Christian, or whatever the case is. It seems like everybody is making a conscious effort to come together and actually not only influence change, but actually be about the business of actual change. So for me, I think it's been incredibly encouraging just to see the amount of, like I said, the amount of care people have put into this has been amazing.
You use the word pause, and that feels important here because in many ways the world was on pause for the one reason when we talk about COVID. And,
Right.
the George Floyd case being as sad as it is, he is not the first person things like that have happened to. I
Right.
guess, Jovan, maybe the reason we did take a step back this time is because we were
Right.
paused for one thing, and maybe it allowed us all to notice what we should have been seeing the whole time.
Right. I mean, God rest his soul. Obviously, hearts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers go to the families. But I think again, it's hard to. Well, the sports has that way of getting you away from sometimes the bigger picture stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best distraction there is on planet Earth. Whether it be in the fall, whether it be in the winter, summer, spring, whatever the sport you're playing, it seems to get people to gravitate towards it, and it gets you to focus on whether it be a basketball game or a football game. You're more focused on that 3.5 hours of that 2 hours as opposed to the things that are going on outside. It's a great distraction at times, but unfortunately, in this case, having the world stop and be able to see it is something that it's a reference point to a lot of people that there is a bigger picture other than the sport, you love to watch, you love to play. And so I think, like I said, I think we're hopefully gearing ourselves in the right direction. But I think, again, something like the pandemic to stop everybody, it finally gave people a lens and a glimpse as to when they have those uncomfortable conversations, if they have them, of what some of their friends of color have been alluding to for the longest
Well, Giovanni, you've never been one to shy away from topics like this, and I've known you
time.
going way back. I mean, you played lacrosse back in the late 2000s, the 2011 grad out of the Cuse. How have you noticed, I guess, the response to what you've been saying? How has that changed, I guess, here in the last month? Because it's not like you're saying something different than you were saying a year ago, but
Right.
I feel you're probably getting more people that are picking up what you're putting down right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the wrong time to say "I told you so." You know what I'm saying? But it
But you
does.
can.
Yeah, but it does feel that way. In all seriousness, I do understand that people have an obligation to, how they see things. Again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I completely understand that. But I think the most important thing for me was to always talk about it when it's uncomfortable and talk about it when it's not popular. I think that right now it's the popular topic, so there's so many more people engaged. But I think that leading up to this point, yes, I do understand that to some people my presentation might come off as controversial or anything like that. But I will say to my teammates, they can attest for anything. I will tell you, they'll tell you I'm a very nice person. You know what I mean? And having these conversations are not something where I hate them or dislike them, but they're willing to go there with me. and they were willing to ask those questions. So I just think that, yeah, I mean, to be ahead of the curve is not a good thing in this case. I mean, it is somewhat disappointing, but like I said, it's one of those, well, it took you long enough. I'm just glad you're here now. So, you learn to live with the fact that, yeah, maybe people weren't ready to have that conversation at one point. They're ready to have it now. I can only meet you where you are.
I guess the way I sense the way you go about it is it's not out of anger, but you don't sugarcoat it, right? That's never been
Correct.
your style or
Right.
anything.
It again, sometimes to say the uncomfortable, it might come out. It might come out in a very vulgar way, and sometimes it may come out. The issue is the it's either or type of thing. Is if I don't, pull my hair out over it, then obviously it's not that big a deal, or I'm being too extreme. But if I just mention it calmly, oh, it must not be that big a deal because I'm not overreacting, I'm not demonstrative. So it's again, it's a very difficult line to kind of walk in a situation like this because you don't want to turn people off to listening to the message. So again, I understand where people are on certain things, but like I said, it's just you meet them where they are, and now they're ready to talk about it, so we talk about it.
Before we get into a little bit what you're doing right now, specifically with your Instagram videos, the Twitter, the YouTube, everything you've got going right now specific to this, just to kind of let everyone know what you're doing right now. Lacrosse professionally, you put in the years, and that's in the rear view now, but you've settled down. You're in Syracuse now, but you've settled in the North Carolina area. You're teaching. What specifically do you teach down there, and how is that going?
So I teach at Phoenix Montessori School. It is in Huntersville, which is technically like 20 minutes north of Charlotte. But love it down there. Been teaching there. This would be my first full year completed. I was teaching at a public school down there before I actually took this job. But still, I teach middle school. I teach middle school English. But I'd like to actually, I'm just going to start moving into the social media world. We're actually going to have a class for social media. And believe it or not, we're going to start doing something with tech, in general, because I do have a podcast as well. So some of the kids who have sparked some sort of interest in maybe like doing a YouTube page or doing something along the social media side, we're actually going to be getting a class where I get to actually teach it from the ground up on some of the things, public speaking and things of that nature. But just stop playing last year. I figured it would be better to walk away from the game healthy as opposed to staying out there too long and getting hurt. So yes, I actually still play summer ball, which is fun. It is not nearly as competitive as was once upon a time, so it's like the perfect plan. I also am the director of all youth rec lacrosse for the Carolina Miners in Concord, North Carolina. I do all the cheesy stuff where the kid picks up the ball and puts it in his stick instead of picking it up like a regular ground ball. All the cute stuff. I'm a part of that side. I do the boys and the girls.
All right. Well, the next lacrosse player that retires from summer league ball will be the first. So that everyone gets it going in the summer still. But I'm curious, Jovan. I mean, you're a teacher. I mean, trained professional. Like this is what you do now. How does that influence, I guess, the way you attack these videos, where now you're taking on everything that's happening racially in the world, and I guess using your teacher background to maybe present it to the world here in maybe a different way than if somebody just picked up their phone or something and started talking into it.
Right. So when you're getting ready for a game, for example, if we're playing, we just got done with one game, automatically you get on the bus, whether you have a home or away game, you focus on whoever the next opponent is. And then you start breaking down, whether it be practice, whether it be you watch the film, you break it down piece by piece. This is what we're going to do against this guy. This is what we're going to do against this, this kind of offense, this defense. You break it down simultaneously. It's the same exact. You try to translate that into the classroom and teaching something. So the most important thing for me is to be able to let whoever I'm speaking to through the videos fact check me. So I have to make sure that all of my information is valid, because I know that at the end of the day, I cannot put out anything that is wrong. Let's be honest, especially for the history lessons. It's important to make sure that everything is dialed in. So I actually approach it as if I'm writing like a term paper. I make sure that my all my sources are valid. I make sure I have more than one. I make sure that at least there's going to be specified, you know what I mean? Almost like to avoid plagiarism ideas. You know what I mean? You're going to make sure that every single I is dotted and every T is crossed. So I try to use the lacrosse part of pretty much what I've known since I was 13 of starting to play into, being a 31-year-old teacher and just trying to put all of that into being as clear as humanly possible so that there are no misappropriations with anything that I say.
How important do you view, I guess, you do some of the history lesson stuff, as you
Yes.
said, where, hey, we know this, like the stories that are happening now are very important, and these are the people's lives right now. But the history of how we got here is hundreds of years long.
Right.
How important is it for you to, I guess, let people know that these two things are connected in a way that is important right now?
I don't think anybody just automatically wakes up angry. There's a gradual process. Or some people might be have short tempers, some people have long tempers, or some people are incredibly impatient as opposed to those who are very patient. So when you break that, when you're looking at somebody who's asking for society, American society in particular, for an idea of social change, then you have to take into consideration some people might be on the fringe of going absolutely nuts, as opposed to some who are like, oh, I could sit here. It's not that big a deal. We'll get it right 50 years from now. But we're passing down what we've been passed down as a millennial myself, being passed down somebody's hurt, somebody's fear, all those things being passed down from one generation to another. So I felt like we're doing the lessons is that, like you said, we didn't get from A to Z in one big step. You gradually get to maybe this is why they might feel this way. And I felt like the best way I could do that is putting on my teacher cap without looking like I'm angry, breaking in someplace or, stomping on an American flag or something. And I figured I'm very good at what I do. I love what I do. And why not just get in front of a camera and teach a lesson in the way I would do as if I was in a classroom and just see the progress it would make. And it's been a game changer for me.
And we pass along our condolences to you specifically. Your dad passed away recently, about a month and a half ago now, and he was a 30-plus year teacher himself in the Syracuse City schools. How much did you get from him, I guess, that has sort of led you on this path to being a teacher yourself?
I think that he specified the crowd that he was going to be teaching. So he did not do it. Well, he started with middle school, went up to high school, but actually what he ended up being once he became a supervisor, he was involved with convicted felons who had just hit parole and things like that. And he said that the most important thing for him had nothing to do with where that guy or that woman had been. It was about getting them an opportunity to show that there is actual change there. And I think that I took that as we've also had 40 foster children in our home since even before I was born. I have an older brother and an older sister, but we've always had a full house. And his ability to have somebody walk in, and again, I'm seeing this and I have to be a part of these kids' lives. They're walking in. They might have a mother that was, on drugs or a father that's doing a 25 to life sentence, and their family dynamic is completely broken. And they're coming into a situation where your most important responsibility is to make them feel comfortable and make them feel loved and make them feel wanted and desired. And that was really what I got from my father as far as the teaching aspect. You cannot go in there with a slant, especially as a teacher. Some of the most influential, whether you hated or loved a teacher, you have a teacher that really sticks out in your mind of they had that kind of impact. So I took that from him is that you're going to have so many personalities walk in. You're going to have so many different types of people, single parent homes, both parents, no parents, grandmother raised their own grandfather. There's so many different dynamics of every kid, every man, woman, or child. And you have to be able to teach them and meet them where they're at. And that was the thing I got the most from him.
Obviously, there's a lot of people talking about what's going on in the world right now, but the reason we're talking to you, Jovan, it's over your shoulder. We see the 23 jersey in the
Right.
Syracuse. You're tied to the lacrosse program, and you're tied to the lacrosse community, has been there for a very long time. And this is not saying anything that nobody doesn't know. There are not a lot of big-time black lacrosse players, and there have not been. And it's one where, like, I'm about to list off a few, and I'm sure I'm missing some, but the thing is I'm not missing that many. You go back and the last 20 years or so, you think of Chaz Woodson was a great player. Johnny Christmas stood out. Kyle Harrison really took the game to the next level. There was the Bratton twins, Miles Jones, yourself included as an All-American. And I'm sure I left out somebody, but Jovan, I didn't leave out a lot.
You're right.
Yeah. What do you take away out of that? I mean, there's so many different ways of, does lacrosse want black players? Do black players want to play lacrosse? So whichever way you want to come at it from, I guess, what's your view of it now, of being involved in the lacrosse community as a kid who grew up as a black lacrosse player in the Syracuse area?
I think that I actually was having a discussion like this earlier today. When you grow up wherever you grow up, and you are not in a situation where you're identifying or you're in constant communication with somebody who doesn't look like you, what happens over the course of time is that you start to some of those perceptions become truth until you actually meet a person of color or a white person in my case, and you're not around them on a consistent basis. So you might be hearing something consistently, and you might actually think that that's how they are. They are, without really getting to know a good amount of them. What I think in lacrosse is that we've had this stereotype with the game of lacrosse for so long. And my question has always been, are we willing to break it? Because if we're willing to break it, then that means that more than likely the game of lacrosse will start to look almost like what it looked like when you started to add from the NBA to the ABA, right? Like, from the ABA to the NBA. When they finally got an opportunity, all of a sudden the dynamics of the game started to change. The colors started to change. The whole mood of the game started to change. But I think that the thing is that it's about affordability. And at the end of the day, I know with my parents, I mean, we couldn't afford to get my stuff. I mean, it was a family friend. I mean, if you actually look at all my helmets when I was at Syracuse, had Mr. P on the right on the helmet. And that was literally because a man saw my mother crying at her work desk, and saw that, and he asked her why she was crying, and she literally said, because I can't afford to buy my son. My father was away on a work trip in Cuba, and she said, I can't afford to buy him all the stuff because she looked at how much it cost. Anyway, long story short of that, he finds out how much it cost, and he just puts out $100 a bill, and he goes, you don't owe me back, and said to her, it'll be the best decision you ever made in your life. And I had signed my letter of intent and started fall ball, and John Palmenter passed away before he ever got to see me play at Syracuse.
Wow.
So it's, again, to me, it's an accessibility thing, but again, how willing are you to start to put down the proverbial, if you can't afford to play, sucks for you, and start to open it up? Because I believe that when you open it up without any of the perceptions that go with that, I believe that you'll get you'll see a bigger crowd of black players.
Well, it's so easy to think. I mean, all right, you're a kid. It's the summer. Hey, right now, it's this time of year. Right now, you want to go outside and play. How easy is it to? I mean, obviously, right now is the wrong example with COVID and everything. But in general, you pick up a basketball, you have your shoes, you go to the local court, you can play pickup all day long, and somebody got a basketball. Besides that, it's give or take free.
Right.
What can be done, I guess, in that scenario? I know there's the Harlem lacrosse clubs have been doing some good work here over the last handful of years. Hampton University was the first HBCU to step up and field a team a few years back. But it's still, Jovan, to me, feels like that's the exception to the rule. How important is that for the game of lacrosse, I guess, to make those efforts and reach into that community to see what it can lead to?
Again, I think that we have this built-up fear between two groups of people, really. From growing up where I grew up, and then obviously going to being transferred from one school to another. I had friends there. I had black friends at CBA that, we were all scholarships in order to go to CBA. And when I started to go to their houses and see where they lived, but again, we're wearing shirt and ties you know what I mean, Monday through Friday, and we're in dress code, it started to open my eyes to that's not everybody's story, is that, you know what I mean? Like, they're not given the opportunity to just have somebody have a sponsor, you know what I mean, pay their schooling so that they can go and play. But again, when you're unfamiliar, some of these schools are general areas and such. You have parents who are repeating the same thing, and it goes down to the child of, well, you're just not out there. You're not out here because you can't afford it, or you're not out here because you're not good enough. What happens with anything, it comes down to, like, how often do you have your own lacrosse stick, for example? Like, are you able to literally get a stick and go to find a wall and play catch? Are you able to do those things? Because I know a lot of those programs, they'll use the stick for the 2 hours and they'll take them back. You know what I mean? So even that little bit of amount of time, again, you get a lot better at the time when you're not on the field. So not being able to get that general accessibility all the time, it starts to it puts you behind a little bit. But look, I think that there are a lot of programs doing something towards that issue, but I also will say there's a lot of people not willing to put their foot in it, in which that's maybe another conversation for another day. But I feel like at the end of the day, like, look, to those who are trying, it is not enough sometimes to give the kid the stick. It's more or less the ability to let that kid take it home. And again, there's a number of things, but we don't all have backyards and goals and stuff like that. And again, that feeds into the stereotype that is associated with the game of lacrosse. But ultimately, it's supposed to be a safe space, and when kids don't feel safe, they stop playing it. You know what I mean? And that kind of lingers into other things. Now there's no trust there, anything like that. And that's not even just about the game of lacrosse.
Obligation is the wrong word, I think, with any of this, but do you feel a responsibility, a role, a something on somebody like you that, as you said, you had somebody that stepped up and gave you a shot, and boy, did it ever pay off for you. And who knows who the next Jovan Miller could be if they're given that chance.
I honestly think you had it right with obligation. I think I think it would be I would not be doing the lacrosse community or Black lacrosse players their due justice if I did not share my story, or at least share my experience and say, look, like, based on what I know and based on what I've experienced, if I could share anything with you, maybe this is what we need to improve along this journey as it takes to get to a Syracuse. And again, I do understand that we talk about academics, we talk about all these different factors that do lead into being able to go to a Syracuse, to a Duke, to a Hopkins. But that dream is killed sometimes within the first year and a half of the kid starting the game, all because of lack of funding, or maybe there's a change of, or maybe let's just say they've increased the fee, or maybe some of the schools, maybe they don't have a fee, but again, it's more or less a phys ed thing as opposed to actual team game. So all these dreams, a lot of times they might get shut off very soon into the process of even figuring out whether you love lacrosse or another sport. And I think, like I said, I wouldn't be doing due justice at all if I didn't share my story, if I didn't share that opportunity or share my experience and maybe open up opportunities for the next generation.
It's I don't know if he ever actually would have covered you, Jovan, but my college classmate, Anish Shroff, is now the head lacrosse voice for ESPN, and he wrote a beautiful article about being brown in the lacrosse world back around Memorial Day.
Yes.
And I think that got a great response. It feels like his role is important now too, where he was not a lacrosse player, but he, as he mentioned in the article, he was not viewed as a guy that fit in the space, and now he's in charge of the space in a lot of ways. It feels like people coming from maybe a different angle than just a player, I guess, can be important about this too.
Well, it's always driven me crazy with sports personalities, for example. When they're saying something in support of any athlete, nobody will ever say, you never played before. They'll never say that. As soon as they start getting, you get negative feedback, whoever said athlete is will say, well, he never played. What does he know? But I think Anish, Anish didn't even have to do what he did. And I think that that's more admirable that he stepped out and said something and wrote an article and was well done. It was unbelievable. But I think that, again, that's a responsibility of all people. And it's not just the person that writes the article. It's also up to those to read it and internalize it and digest it and let it really sit in their spirit as to how he feels in that same capacity. Because I think that one of the things that's taken away from some of us is, I think that the thing that maybe distinguished me after I stopped playing was that I had a great career, and I was speaking and saying I was uncomfortable at times, or there were certain things that I wish we would have spoken about. I wasn't some third or fourth string player and saying, oh, I was mistreated or I felt like this. Being a important part of a championship team, and again, having a career that I had, and also telling, yeah, I know you guys, yeah, we lost 8 times in 4 years, but this was still a challenge for me. These are the things that I chose not to share. So I feel like Anish and other players, I mean, there are other people that are non-lacrosse players or non-athletes that have a very unique perspective, and we need to do our best to just hear them out rather than, well, if he didn't play, then I'm not going to listen to him. Or, because they've never walked in my shoes, they don't get me. Like, that's incredibly unfair and dismissive of the bigger picture and the bigger point that they're trying to make.
8 losses in 4 years. The last one I still don't accept. That's a story for another day. We'll just leave that. That could be another hour we can do here. I'll just set that to the side right now. But that's one that still just burns inside. And I was only upstairs, not down on the field. But Jovan, let's wrap up on this thought. As you talk about with the history lessons and how this has gone back for hundreds of years. And I think a lot of positive things have happened here in the last month. But by no means does that mean that, okay, check, solved.
Right.
Where do you think we'll be? I don't know, 6 months, a year. Wherever you're looking out to, where you're going to feel that maybe something has turned the corner for good, and that, it's not done, but it'll be at least headed in a direction for you that makes sense.
I feel like as a teacher, the kids that usually get whatever the material you're teaching, those who do stuff outside of what the teacher sets in front of them are usually the ones that go a little bit further in regards to not just testing, but their general interest in other things. So to my audience, for example, I have over going on 6,000 followers via Instagram or whatever, on there. So that's my crowd. That's my audience. But I know a lot of there are professional lacrosse players and other athletes that follow me as well. If they're spreading whatever all of my lessons, okay, there's one thing. But they're also putting it in front of a student. Let's just say that all my viewers are students, so you're putting it right in front of them. They're only doing what's required because I give them homework assignments in those videos, but it's right in front of them. To those who, once the video's off and say, man, he said something else that was very interesting, let me look into that myself. It's the people who take that, who take that assertion, who are able to, like I said, it's just it makes you think in a much more broader, perspective. Watch the History Channel all the time as a kid. And then when I was able to start traveling myself, getting to go to Berlin, for example, going to Germany and getting to go to a concentration camp, as uncomfortable as that is, seeing history in its rarest form, in the form of like the authentic, you can touch the ground and something happened here. I think, again, that's like doing your extra, should be like that's getting extra credit. So I feel like people, if you do extra credit, it'll digest a lot more. So it's not just whatever you put in front of a kid or whoever, an adult. It's more or less that curiosity of whatever I might be bringing up, or maybe something that interests you in regard to a history situation. That kind of, it's going to propel you higher and higher and give your understanding even more.
Well, Jovan, always enjoyed our conversations. This was one I hope people take the time here to watch this, because your words ring out quite true here, especially at this time in the history of everything that's going on. So appreciate the time, and keep up all the good things you're doing out there.
Much appreciated, Higgs. Thank you.